So welcome to our backyard here in Bundanoon. We've got a fairly sloping block. We borrow the view of the trees from the property behind. We recently did a renovation, so most of this backyard was a quagmire of hard clay, and so we'll just take you around now and show you the backyard. So we're moving off the back veranda, and we're moving down the steps down to a couple of big garden beds which have just been put in post the renovation. So here we've got three groups of Japanese maples, and they've just been put in and they're just turning colour now. And we've underplanted the Japanese maples on this side with a large number of different kinds of bulbs, and on the other side a flowering ground cover which I think is called Bako palm. Probably got the pronunciation wrong there. As we move down the garden bed, we've put in two dark crepe myrtles and some ground cover banksias. The ground cover banksias seem to be doing quite well. They've got quite a bit of new growth on them. And as we move over here, we've got put in three banksia Sirata, which have that lovely serrated leaves. The banksias, we had banksias here prior to the renovation. They didn't survive getting moved. Really hard to move banksias, I think. And so hopefully these banksias will grow up quite tall, but of course the ground is much more different than it used to be here. For the first time we've trying our hand at growing some vegetables, so lettuce, spring onions, fennel, beetroot and cabbages, and so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Probably we're just feeding the snails, the possums and maybe the rabbits, although we don't seem to get any rabbits here. I shouldn't say that, because now they'll come. Going up the side of the house now, this was used to be almost a forest of Japanese windflowers, and they've been heavily disturbed in the renovation, and I'm surprised to see though that they are coming back. Even some flowers further up. Windflowers didn't do too well during the drought and they seem to be flowering much later, but I'm really pleased to see that they're coming back to the place that they used to be. Now as we go down the backyard, we're looking at a very prolific lemon tree, which I imagine's been here for a very long time. Very juicy lemons, and we'll just move down the backyard now past the weeping Japanese maples and into the grassed area. So this whole area was regrassed with fescue grass, and just as we put it down, we've probably got the hottest time in summer. Over here we have some sweet pea which were done with just from seeds, and so they're just emerging, and we'll have to protect those from the birds. As we move down the backyard, you can see that we planted a group, I think it's called a copse, of 5 silver birch. I was very worried about these silver birch during the drought, but they seem to have come through it. They're probably about 6 years old. If you look over the lemon tree, you can just see a bottlebrush there, Bottlebrush Mary McKillop, and it does really well, surprisingly, there, coming out in very long pink flowers. Moving down the yard, there used to be a couple of very poorly performing fruit trees here, which we took out a couple of years ago, and we've continued the silver birch theme going all the way along the backyard. When we took out the fruit trees, we kept one blossom tree which was not doing terribly well, but it's really loved the fact that all the fruit trees have gone, and it's doing very well now. Planting 2 grevilleas on either side of the blossom tree, and they also seem to be doing well. another Bottlebrush here, which I've just cut back a few weeks ago, and as you can see, the red new red leaves, and it's just starting to come into flower. As we move through here now, we've got a couple of refugees from our old house in Sydney. So a silky oak here, which is trying to make its way up through the canopy from next door, but it's doing relatively well. And jacaranda over here. Certainly I wouldn't think that jacarandas particularly like the Southern Highlands, but it is also trying to get to the light, and it's been there a couple of years and it's doing okay as well. All the plants over here were moved from one side of the garden to the other side of the garden, and almost all of them survived. So we uplifted all the dahlia bulbs. Again, dahlia's flowering very late this year, I guess not doing too well with the drought, but we've had quite a few flowers, probably coming to the end of it now. So here we have at the back here is a self-seeded wattle tree, which we might have to do something about, but I do like the wattle flowers. But it's taking the light, and from these two Mexican hawthorns which we planted, and the Mexican hawthorns are really struggling to get out into the light, which also inhibits the development of their lovely yellow berries. Down here we have silver box, which is needing a bit of a cutback to tidy up the hedge a bit, I guess. Also moved from one side of the yard to another. They were a couple of years old when they were moved. I was very worried about them, but they do seem to have survived. Bit of rosemary down here. These roses were not meant to be here. I had hurriedly transplant them one day when the builders said that they were going to bulldoze them. They've actually done not too bad here, but I'll move them to a sunnier spot out the front garden. A flowering cherry, which was also a couple of years old when I moved it, and quite pleased with the way that it's survived here. In fact, I'd say it probably likes it here better than in its old spot. Couple of lilacs over here, which for some reason are almost in flower. Again, they were moved, they survived. One lilac didn't survive. Hydrangeas at the back. Lovely buddleia tree there, coming over from next door. Lovely to see its purple flowers and all the butterflies that it attracts. Again, the Japanese windflowers, which are flowering very late this year, and they would be much more prolific if we didn't have the drought. And a tulip tree there at the back, which didn't flower. It had its long stem early in the season, but that was taken by the wind. And finally we have a fig tree there, which the birds get to eat the fruit rather than us, so maybe one day we'll successfully net it, and then a wistringia underneath, which does quite well, and more hydrangeas and some new azaleas which we've put in there. Okay, so that's our back garden. We've also got a front garden, but we'll save that for another day. Thanks.